Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes a pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's fact. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to episode 164 of the Last Round Podcast. Thank you again for joining us week to week. We're how many years are we into this show now, Mike? Is it three and a half? We're a couple years in, right? 4? I mean, started a while ago.
3 and a bit, right? Because 52 weeks in a year, 164 episodes. So yeah, just over 3. Be 4 years in September because it was Canelo.
Well, it's
Triple G.
If you count all the bonus shows we've done, especially all the shows we've done at actual events, I think it's at almost 200. So
yeah,
but actual weekly official episodes, it's 164. But whether you were here for all 164 or the 200 episodes, we appreciate it. This week, as you can see after you click the title, whether you clicked it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast, you could see our special guest of the week. He is a boxing and MMA correspondent for The Insider. I don't know if it's The Insider or this is The Insider. I think it's The Insider. And he's also a BWAA member and a Hall of Fame voter. He just recently moved to the United States over here in the West Coast in Las Vegas, Nevada. Al Dawson joins us here on the Last Round. Thank you very much for joining us, Al.
Thanks for having me. Congrats on the 3-year anniversary, you guys. You guys are killing it, all these shows. So I appreciate coming on board and talking about boxing and everything with you guys. We
appreciate it. Yeah, I was telling Mike when you a couple weeks ago when you had put that you were moving out here for boxing, I had told Mike, I was like, oh, he's going to be in our time zone. We got to get him, because like we interview people from all over the world, but obviously if you're in the United States, specifically in the West Coast, it's a lot easier for everybody's schedule to coordinate. So we've been eyeing you for quite a while, Al, and we're glad we can finally get you on here.
I appreciate that. And I think that's Zoom kind of helped it during the pandemic and things, but I was kind of getting used to doing interviews and calling, athletes and coaches on the West Coast. It would be like, gone midnight, my time in the UK, which is still only what's that, like 3-4 o'clock over here, but I much prefer operating on these sorts of times over here. It was a move that's I pitched it to Insider in like 2019, and then the pandemic got in the way. Trump's immigration ban kind of complicated things as well, but now I'm here. It's amazing. I've already done one Premier Boxing Champion show. I didn't do the whole fight week. I kind of just went to the event for Turman and Barrios. Last weekend, I wasn't up too much, just kind of getting used to the area. This weekend, I'm back at the UFC for the Apex show. And then next weekend, the Premier Boxing Champions are back in town. Actually, at a casino I've only ever been to as like a tourist. I don't really know if there's been too many fights at the Cosmopolitan, but, that's a casino that is, it's cool to hang out in. So I'm looking forward to doing like a whole fight week there and speaking to the guys then. But yeah, just being out here, the events just come thick and fast. I think I've got an event to go to every single weekend up until late March, and then it kind of tapers down unless I want to travel like further afield. But I might just take a few weeks not off, but just kind of staying here, working remotely in Las Vegas, and then it all picks up again. Working Saturday to Saturday, either in Los Angeles or here. But if I was doing that in London, the UFC only goes to London once a year. Didn't in the pandemic. I was going over to Abu Dhabi. The big boxing shows are kind of few and far between. But what Britain has is the fandom. The boxing's really felt there. It's not like one of the major sports like soccer or football, depending on like who we're speaking to, British or international audience or American. But the last UK fight I was at was Joshua and Usyk, and I'd never been to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium before, even as like a spectator, let alone as a reporter. But the atmosphere there was class, and just the main event was just it was ridiculous. Usyk put on a great performance, and it was great to, it was a real privilege really to be, on press row and see that unfold all between us. Usyk cleared out cruiserweight, now he's gone up and looked to force a heavyweight. I realize this is like an answer that's just meandered for about like 3 minutes. So
it's all right. It's all right. It's all right. The listeners love it, man. They love hearing from different people all over the sport. So we definitely appreciate it, and I'm sure they appreciate it. But I kind of wanted to touch on you said that you asked Insider in 2019, you kind of proposed the idea of coming to the States. That's interesting because, that never really happens when an employee will ask essentially their boss or their company, like, hey, you should send me. That's a pretty big move. How did you get that going? Yeah,
I've been an Insider for 5 years, and pretty much 5 years to the day yesterday, I think it was. And it's headquartered in New York City, but there's bureaus literally all around the world. In America alone, we've got newsrooms in New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago. Then further afield, the London office is pretty big. We've got a bureau in Singapore, and then there's kind of like outsourced, place, like they translate. There's Insider offices in Germany, Spain, France. I think there's one in Tokyo. So that like the company's international, and I knew that they had relocated some people, not many before, especially to help set up the Singapore bureau. And my wife, we were looking at. She was quite a big influence. She's always been looking at going on an adventure, but me, I was like, how are we going to finance it? We need to kind of like work to keep doing it and stuff like that. So it kind of just went from there. And I said, that it was at the point where I'd already built the boxing and MMA beat from scratch. When I came to Insider, there was no one doing boxing and MMA. So when I came in, I was like doing soccer, tennis, and boxing and MMA. And as soon as I started realizing I could just do combat sports and ditch these other sports that I'm interested in, but I haven't got the passion, like, watching people fight for a living. We ended up getting millions and millions of readers every month. And it kind of, they were sending me to Vegas and, sending me to, at the time, through up and down Britain, through to Ireland to cover Bellator and things like this. I kind of knew that it makes sense to come over here and, work on the time zone, 2, forge even better contacts and stronger relationships over here. And then 3, just keep going to the events, which is where, that's where readers kind of want to see, a reporter out. They want to see the live reporting and all the sort of rumors and the, conversations you kind of have on fight week. So it was quite an easy sell, really. So it was signed off pretty much as soon as I pitched it. But then, it just took a while to get here just because of the pandemic. And I'm not sure the immigration ban would have really had too much on it, because I don't think technically I'm an immigrant. I thought I was. I've come here on a working visa, so I think it's seen as something separate. But yeah, it's a dream come true, really. I've always associated, I've always loved American culture, and I've always liked, I've always regarded Las Vegas as the combat sports capital of the world. You've got UFC, massive billion, however many billion, $6 billion company headquartered here. And they've just got, like, if you visit the UFC headquarters, they haven't just got the UFC headquarters, which is where the execs work, and they've got the Performance Institute. They've just got this land as well. And then across that land, they've also got the Apex, which is a TV studio that fits about 500 people, but they're expanding that to 750. And that's where they've been hosting a lot of these behind closed doors pandemic era shows. Right now they've opened it up. So I think there is like, a few hundred people watching these. And then on top of that, you've got Mayweather Promotions, Top Rank. You've got all the gyms, Mayweather Fight Club, City Athletic Gym. Always considering moving to LA, but LA is so close, you can just hop on a flight, and by the time you go up in the air, you're coming back down again. Or you just drive. I'm probably going to drive because I want to see the country a lot. And over in Los Angeles, obviously you've got Golden Boy, Bellator, so many gyms, so many fighters, and I just can't wait to get stuck in.
Yeah, absolutely. You're definitely in a very, very prime location for combat sports. Obviously, that we know that. We're all very fortunate to live on this part of the world as fight fans, because there's a lot of action, and a lot of the major players are over here. So you're definitely going to be busy going up and down from Southern California to Vegas. Sometimes you kind of get, like, we don't want to say we've gotten burnt out on going to fights and covering, but I guess that's a good thing. There's like, hey, man, there's so much going on that sometimes it'll get you and you need like a week or two break. But other than that, you won't find any complaints from too many combat sports fans. So before we kind of dive into this past weekend's fights and obviously news and notes of the upcoming weeks and months of the sport of boxing. How did you get into journalism? Did you always want to do that, or how did you start out in the whole situation?
I think as a kid, I always wanted to write, like, I suppose, like books and things like that. I was always interested in poetry and books. And then it was just a question of making a living out of that. So being a reporter kind of made sense. At the time, there was like so I'm 37. So I went to uni in England around, struggling to even think of the year, like 2002 or something. And then around 2005, I remember this like older journalist coming in to give us a talk, and he was just saying that the industry's dead and you're not going to get work and all this stuff. And like a lot of the students were all looking around like, why even bring this idiot in, to kind of like deflate all of our like hopes and aspirations. He couldn't have been proved more wrong, because like digital was just about to boom. So at first I was quite lucky to get a job at goal.com, and this was when goal.com was really taking off. So I was there for about 3 years, reporting mainly about Premier League football, Champions League football. And then I freelanced for a few football magazines, got involved with BT Sport and this is when like I started to like do multiple sports. I think at the time they had the rights to MotoGP, they had the rights to UFC, and they've still got the rights to UFC. They did a little bit of boxing, and then they had the Champions League rights as well, which are quite, really were valuable. Not so much maybe for BT Sport now, because they're trying to like sell it, or did sell it. I haven't really been up in that sort of news, but and then I joined Insider around 2017, literally, February 2017. And then, once I realized I could just do boxing and MMA, I didn't want to do anything else. I think it's the most interesting of all the sports. I think the athletes, how like, I don't want to use the word crazy, because it's kind of like, kind of how it might have negative connotations in a PC era, but like how crazy could you have to be to like really get into a ring or a cage or an octagon and fight in front of tens of thousands of people, going through a training camp for 10 weeks and putting all of those like injuries you've gone through and separating yourself from like families and things like that. And it all comes down to literally just one night in a 38 game season in football. You can lose a game and you can still win a championship, but so often in this game, especially more so boxing than MMA, you lose one fight, you can have a serious setback. I just think the stakes are so high all the time in combat sports. There's so much on the line, and the characters are always interesting. The fighters are interesting. The coaches, good to speak to get like an insight into things you might not maybe get from the athlete. And then also the execs, the access we have in this sport is second to none.
That's what I was going to touch on. You covered quite a few different sports there. How different is it covering, boxing and MMA? There's so much more attainable, I find.
Yeah, I just think it's the access. I think like, granted, there's some things that you're not going to get straight away, but ultimately, like where I was from in London, Southeast London, the gym that I had the best relationship with at the start, in like this was going back probably 10 years. I boxed there for like white collar a few times. Peacock Gym, this is where the trainers there, Martin Bowers, Tony Bowers. They've got relationships with like Lennox Lewis, Frank Bruno, the people that walk into this gym. One day I was sitting there and Lennox Lewis literally walked in the gym, and he was like, this larger than life guy, 6'6", walks in talking about having a cup of tea, sat down next to me. And he was like, I had my laptop on at the time, I was doing a bit of work, and he was like, oh, right, who are we watching? And I was watching Kevin Johnson at the time, because Kevin Johnson was in the gym sparring. But, you wouldn't really have that level of access with Arsenal Football Club or Chelsea Football Club or any of the London teams. You wouldn't be able to just walk into the training ground and speak to Frank Lampard, or I'm showing my age here by naming people that haven't really been associated with the clubs for a while. But I just think it's different, and that to have those sort of like memories with like, I've got a random selfie with Lennox Lewis just walking in. I remember Floyd Mayweather used the Peacock Gym to train once. I think it was more like a media thing of like, coming over to the UK, that he packed that gym out, man. It was, and again, that, you could walk into that gym. I can't remember I don't think they were selling tickets, but if you wanted to go watch Floyd train for free, just walk to the Peacock that day. And people were literally like, I don't know if you've been to Canning Town, but it's like this classic East London area. But it's got these overpasses overhead, and people were watching from that overpass as well, wondering what was going on with this like packed people crammed into this tight space with sardines, just watching a legend come to train.
Al, can you remember the first boxer you interviewed?
Oh man, I wish I had a good memory, because I honestly don't. I think it would have been like, I think the first one that I was like trying to really get into the spot would have been Frank Buglioni. Okay. So he was like a Frank Warren fighter, I want to say, from probably, it was probably like a prospect maybe 10, 12 years ago. And then, had a couple of losses, and now he's mainly just a guy on Twitter. I think he works in construction now.
What would you say is the major difference in covering boxing and MMA?
I don't want to insult anyone in like any boxing fans, but I when boxing gets it right, there's nothing like it. One of the best events I've seen live was Wilder Fury 2 in Las Vegas, and just the whole fight week was just magic. You speak to people in Top Rank and you realized, I really believed them, that when like Bob Arum, Frank Warren, Tyson Fury, he was saying that he was wanking 7 times a day. I wasn't like too sure about that, but he was saying all sorts of nonsense. And then he would come out and saying he was going to knock out the knockout puncher. And you're like, And then you hear it from like Bob Arum, and you're like, And then you hear it from Frank Warren. You're like, the more people you're speaking to inside the camp, the more it was, I don't know. It felt like we weren't being fed something. And he went and did it. The costumes, when you the 2 guys, they're massive, 6 foot, like Wilder's 6'9", I think. Fury's the smaller guy, and he's 6'7". You've got 2 of the biggest guys in the sport, 2 of the biggest personalities in the sport. I'd watch a 4th fight, I'd watch a 5th fight. I think those 2 guys are just like, they were made for each other, and they will just keep, if they just kept fighting there every time, they would make a great event. So when you have an event like that, I just think MMA doesn't touch it. It's rare for MMA to get to that level, but MMA is way more consistent on a weekly basis, I think. I think it's easier to go to an MMA show and find that there's readers are way more interested in things from the bottom of the card through to the top. I think boxing just doesn't do that as well for whatever reason. Usually it's just to build up the prospects, and they're like, I don't really know what the odds are, but it'd be like a 1 to 500, favorite to go and bulldoze through this other guy, or get rounds against somebody they're supposed to win. But you just don't get that at the UFC shows. Those are, I think, the main differences. But when boxing gets it right, it's magic, and I think it always will be.
One thing that you're definitely known for is your investigation into suspected 1.1 billion drugs boss Daniel Kinahan. Now, Dan's been waiting weeks to ask you about this.
I have. I feel like you're one of the more prominent reporters online, especially on Twitter and stuff like that, who will call out certain things from others and talk about certain things and stuff like that. Just tell us like your whole take on the situation. I mean, I'm sure, obviously a lot of our listeners are hardcore boxing fans. So they all should be aware of the whole situation. Just tell us your whole take on the situation. Obviously, we've seen you respond to other reporters, who also have significant platforms, and you've responded to them on social media in terms of, some type of criticism against how their takes are on the whole situation. Can you just tell us, kind of give us an overview on your whole mentality on that whole situation?
Yeah, the thing that blows my mind is that, for me, this is the most interesting story in combat sports. You've got a guy who's one of the top 3 most powerful people in boxing, and he's a suspected cocaine and drug, the suspected figurehead of a gang that specializes in the mass importation of cocaine, of weapons, and they're named in court as being known for execution style murders. How is that not, like, you've literally got them, the suspected mob, in boxing, and the people the reporters in Ireland, I think, amazing, whether it's the crime reporters or the sports reporters. They're really vocal on it and have been for years, like way longer than what I have. But yeah, when I'm just amazed that I'm one of the few people in actual boxing media who, you know, regularly report on it, because how can it not be the most interesting thing? How can it not be like, you know, how messed up is it that is going on? You know, when somebody who's suspected of all that is literally running the sport in Europe. You know, when people think about who the most, you know, who do you think fans would say is the most powerful person in European boxing? Presumably fans would probably say it's Eddie Hearn, right? It's not, it's Daniel Kinahan. From what I'm told, before all this Probellum stuff, because it looks like, you know, MTK managed fighters are now signing with a promotional deal with Probellum. That's kind of, I'm guessing, going to start freezing Eddie Hearn out, you know, more. But before that, if Eddie Hearn wanted to do something that involved, you know, he'd have to speak to Kinahan. He was all these promoters in Europe, no matter who it is, Frank Warren, Eddie Hearn, you know, Kali Sauerland, they're subservient to Daniel Kinahan. He's the most powerful person. He's the most powerful person in European boxing by far. And then when you think about who he really rivals worldwide, it's only really Al Heyman, Stephen Espinoza. Would it be Bob Arum? How much leeway does Bob Arum, how much say does Bob Arum have over Daniel Kinahan when it comes to something that Daniel Kinahan wants to do? Daniel Kinahan's going to be the one who says, you know, this is what I want to happen. But so when you've got that sort of power structure going on, and it does impact American combat sports, and people involved in American combat sports media should be writing about it, in my opinion, because when you're like, you know, when you've got Bob Arum, like, there's quotes of him praising him, you know, saying he's the captain, and, you know, and all this stuff. It boggles my mind that, like, Jake Donovan's written a few times about it, credit to Jake Donovan, but I can't think of many people outside of Jake, myself, the Irish sports media who really report on it. You know, it seems to be like this thing that's just been hiding in plain sight. I'm really disappointed in the Athletic. I think the Athletic, when they were really like, when they were actually focusing on fight sports, that you know, I was a subscriber. That's the sort of thing, as a subscriber, you would want to read from the Athletic. And the one thing they really did on it, you know, it was Mike Coppinger at the time. He interviewed, or he had quotes from Bob Yalen, and Bob Yalen was saying, yeah, Daniel Kinahan stepped away from the sport. It was bollocks. You know, he hadn't. You know, it was 3 months later, and it was provable bollocks. You know, and that was what that was like the one thing that, you know, you think the Athletic should be known for. And I think they've done investigations with, like, I might be wrong, but I'm sure the soccer side of the Athletic in the UK, I'm sure they were doing investigations into, like, child abuse in the grassroots level of the sport in the UK. So if your reporters are focusing on that in other sports, they should be focusing on where the corruption is, or where the potential corruption is in boxing, and they never did. And that, to me, is a massive letdown. So that's one take I had on it. The other is just, I suppose, going on about just the power structure. Like, it's just fascinating to me that he's the most or one of the most powerful people in the whole sport. And you know, when's he ever given an interview? I've requested comment. You know, every time I've written about Kinahan, I've always tried to reach out to, you know, people who you know, would get to hit, you know, not get to, you know, would pass the message on. I haven't got Daniel Kinahan's phone number, but I know, like, various people who are like in his inner circle, they would never get back to me. I did get a legal letter once. It was like the very first time I was, like, going to write about it, and already it turned into this 4,000 word piece, and I was like, oh man, you know, my editor is not going to enjoy, you know, going through all this, especially as it's, like, so heavily legal stuff. But just as we were getting the rights of reply back from everyone mentioned in the piece, you know, whether it's, you know, you're talking about so many people in boxing that you have to, like, then go to, oh, by the way, you know, we need to get your, you know, do you have a comment on this? So many people would say, you know, no comment. You know, but we did have a legal letter from his lawyers in the UK saying, like, you know, it was all defamation and all this stuff. And, you know, we just published the letter and just proceeded and published our piece anyway. But since then, I think I've written about 20,000 words on it. One of the things I found most interesting was, like, through speaking to people, you know, or, like, on backgrounds, they're happy to be quoted, just they didn't want to be, you know, they didn't want their name put to the quotes. there is definitely bullying going on. Multiple people I spoke to were talking about, strong arming and, this needs to happen or this might happen, and all these sort of, connotations of, feeling, I suppose this is my word now, not theirs, but intimidated by having Daniel Kinahan involved in a various, whatever negotiation it was. I don't really want to say too much with that, in fear of, exposing who was saying this. And it was multiple people. But yeah, there was definitely things like that going on. This story isn't like over either. It's still ongoing. I think what is he in a $2 million default with Heredia Boxing Management? I think they're over your way, aren't they, in California?
Yeah.
So that was like big on in the court cases. They had, he was served and over in Dubai, but never obviously responded. So he's got $2 million in default. And this is just my opinion, but all this stuff that's coming out, and whether it's a tweet from anyone in the media saying, "Oh, Daniel Kinahan's so powerful, what a run he's on over the next few months with these fights that he's organising," and then you see Daniel Kinahan literally on video in Dubai with Tyson Fury, and I spoke to somebody who was there, and they said that the media basically were fawning over him. So when you've got that, for me, I have been told before that whenever Kinahan has his name in the press, whether somebody is saying it, it's because he specifically wants it to. So for me, that was, I'm kind of guessing, but I feel like it's right that he was, that all that sort of, him being, seen with photos and having photos put out on social media and having this video and, having the being there with the media with Tyson Fury in Dubai, I think it was more to cover up, more to like detract from the news of being in default.
Were you never worried about, putting a piece out about him? Because you're talking about a cartel right here.
I think, like in a way, yeah, but also I think like
should we say alleged legally?
Yeah. Okay.
Should we say alleged cartel?
Yeah, in a way, yeah, but also in a way, I just think like I think he's just got far bigger things to worry about than a boxing journalist. Like how all the things that the crime reporters in Ireland have been writing about. This has been like they've been writing about it for a decade. More than a decade, I think, since 2010, maybe even before. So what's a boxing journalist to him, really? If anything, maybe it might upset him more that like he's got this power where it's like hardly anyone in boxing is really talking about it. But no, I don't think it's really like that. The more I wrote on it, the less worried I got. I think it was just one of the things like you write about at the start, and it's just the fear of the unknown. But then you've done it, and it's like, oh well. And then you start. The thing with me is that when I've been told information or something, I just can't really like. When you hear it from multiple people, I don't think I can really like. It just plays in my mind a lot. Like I've got. Don't want to sound like a knob, but I've got like quite a few readers with Insider. It's like a massive platform. I just think people, if I know something and I know it's true and I've heard it from multiple people, as a journalist, you've got a duty to kind of like inform your readers of that. So that was more outweighed any of the fear I had. I also went to events where so many Kinahan embroiled people were, and it was fine. If anything, it was funny, going up to like his lawyers and the people that, he clearly associates with. And at first they were kind of, some were a bit offish, but over time, the last time I saw them all, they were all quite fine, really. I think it's just people kind of accept it now. It's the nature of the game. I'm the journalist and he's the subject of interest. And, such a massive character in the sport, and so few people in the sport on the media side, even talk to him. So the other thing I think there's just like for me, I haven't really put this out there yet, but I do think there's like race and white privilege at play here when Al Heyman, who's, also one of the top 3 most powerful people in boxing, he's been criticized a lot over the years. 1, for not giving interviews. 2, he's been called a cancer. He's been called a criminal. He's been called a racial slur through various people in boxing, or, whether it's in the media or in the industry. And he's not a criminal or a cancer or, these things that people say. And then you've got Daniel Kinahan, who people are calling the messiah of boxing, and people are calling you know, so I don't know. There's just things there that to me it doesn't add up. You know, you've got. I don't know. I haven't really articulated my thoughts on that, but I do think there's something there where you've got a Caucasian, you know, white Irish guy who's one of the most powerful people in boxing and barely gets any criticism for being literally, you know, he's the suspected figurehead of a you know, $1 billion crime operation. And then you've got an African-American male who gets a hell of a lot of criticism. And really, you know, what does he do apart from run Premier Boxing Champions? He's a legitimate character. You know, he's never had, you know, what crimes he's been suspected of? None. For me, there's something there as well that, you know, maybe a predominantly white media is potentially, you know, I don't know, struggling now to find the right word. I'm more of a writer than a talker.
So, Al, the move to Las Vegas isn't because you got run out of London then? No. Probably safer here, to be fair. But no. I mean, I've been to Vegas before. I loved it. I've only ever seen the Strip. But I'm in quite a good location. I'm about 15 minutes away from the Strip. I'm also 15 minutes away from the mountains. So I just think America's a beautiful country. It's definitely got its issues but like all countries have. But from you know, I want to be here and I want to be in boxing and be involved in MMA. And you know, the countryside here is just like nothing I've really, you know, it's so far removed from what I'm used to in London.
Absolutely. And one more thing on the whole Daniel Kinahan situation. I mean, don't you think, and Mike and I have talked about this on past episodes, you know, with other guests and then ourselves, but you know, with the network that he's building and he still continues to build, especially when Probellum comes onto the picture officially, and then he has MTK, and then he signs guys like Terrence Crawford and, you know, Jojo Diaz and, you know, more significant names, especially on the American side. Don't you think promoters, especially major promoters like Bob Arum, obviously, or even Eddie Hearn and Al Heyman, kind of look at it like, well, you know, even if we don't want to work with the guy, he has so many fighters that we need to work with. So they kind of keep low to the ground just to kind of keep business going.
It's a bit of a weird situation, isn't it? Like boxing, because, you know, can you really blame the promoter for, you know, making a fight that, you know, might need to be made for whatever reason, and having to work with you know, someone like Daniel Kinahan? I don't really think you can. I just think it's more to do with the lack of structure in boxing. Really, there should be, you know, governance. In soccer in England, you've got like a fit and proper person test, where if somebody wants to take over a football club, there's like probably like quite a basic mild background check on whether they should, or, you know, where the funds are coming from and that sort of thing. But there's nothing there's no organization in boxing to, you know, there's just nothing, you know, it's just promoters and managers, and it's like a free for all to do, you know, whatever you want, which is why there's no barriers to entry as well, which is why you have characters like Daniel Kinahan come in and use the sport for whatever reason they want to. One of the things I was trying to do was I was speaking to politicians in Britain to say, you know, if the sport of boxing in Britain can't govern itself, should the government step in and do something? Ultimately, that it went to, you know, one politician thought yes, took it to the Department of Culture, Media, Digital and Sport, and it didn't go further than that. So I think ultimately, when it came to like the cabinet, you know, the decision makers in government, you know, either they didn't look at it or they didn't want to get involved.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry, to answer your question, I don't think you can really blame the promoters or anyone. Look, Danny Kinahan's so big, you're gonna deal with him eventually, or you know, people he. It's not just him; it's like his network of operatives who, you know, are going through various, you know, points in boxing. I'll keep saying it. He's one of the most powerful people in the sport. If not, he's definitely the top three. It just depends what order you've got. You know, Heyman, Espinoza, Kinahan, and, you know, Bob Arum. So yeah, it's more for me. It's more to do with the fact that there's no governance, and there's no one set. There's no like you know, we see it with like people that take steroids. I'm not too, you know, bothered about PEDS issues as much as other reporters, but I mean, how many times did Jarrell Miller, test positive? He's going to be back. There's no question that somebody's going to pick up Jarrell Miller. Bob Arum gave him a lifeline and then he popped again. It was crazy. But like, if he didn't pop again, I'm sure they would have made the Joshua fight, even after all that shit that went on. I don't know how many times he popped it, but like with that first time, I think it was 4 times. Was it 3 times or 4 times?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just makes the fight bigger. Like, in a weird way, that would just sell the fight even more, especially as like, Jarrell Miller's can sell a fight anyway, but I don't know. Jarrell Miller will probably be back. There's no one to really, issue any sort of checks and, what to do in the sport. And I think that's what lets the sport down ultimately, more so than, promoters working with Kinahan.
Miller just becomes the heel, he just becomes the villain, to whoever the home fighter is. Like, he's the hero, he's the villain, like WWE style. So yeah he'll get used again.
Yeah, absolutely. Al, as a reporter, who's the biggest golden goose in terms of an interview? If you only had one chance and they said, okay, you can either interview Al Heyman or Daniel Kinahan.
Oh, shit. That's
a hard one, huh?
Yeah, that is really hard. I think I'd probably... I mean, it's hard, but I'd really want to interview Al Heyman. I think, like... I think you can be more honest on podcasts as well. Like, yep. I think Premier Boxing Champions does boxing right. When you look at going back to Kinahan, when you look at the people he deals with, doesn't really deal with PBC or Showtime. And I think there's a reason for that. I think they don't want to. And I think they've seen something, or, I think they just do their own thing, and people criticize that in the media. I'm not one of those. I think Premier Boxing Champions does things right. People can complain about pay-per-view, but that's just not an ill from PPC. That's an ill in the sport generally. Again, people putting things on pay-per-view is not really like a criticism I've got. I think my main thing is reporting on Daniel Kinahan. But yeah, Al Heyman would be the one for me. I think he's a really interesting guy. And obviously, some people in media speak to him. He's just not used as like a on record source. I have to admit, I've never met him. I've never spoken to him. I have spoken to people at PBC though, and yeah, I like the company. I think they've got good fighters. They let the fighters speak for themselves, which kind of goes against what we're kind of used to with Top Rank and Matchroom, who have got this larger than life figurehead, with Bob Arum or Eddie Hearn. And when you go and speak to either Arum or Eddie Hearn, you have got interview gold, whether it's some un-PC comment or some trash talk from another executive or another fighter. They're both really good value and when it comes to speaking to the media. But the PPC are the opposite of that, where they let they don't want to have a figurehead. If anything, probably you could maybe say Leonard Ellaby speaks for PPC sometimes, but he's not. He runs Mayweather Promotions. He doesn't run PPC. So yeah, but even going back before Al Heyman got involved in boxing, what he did in music, how successful a businessman can you be when you've changed the game for various musical artists? What Drake was saying about Al Heyman checks for all of my events, and then what he did for Beyonce, Jay-Z, all these these are some of the most famous people in the world. What would they say about Al Heyman? If you were going to do his biography or something. Let alone, so how, he had so much success before he even entered boxing, what he did with Floyd Mayweather, and then, getting into PBC. I think there'd be loads for a journalist to get stuck into with Al. So for me, the thing with Daniel Kinahan, where would that interview even take place? Would I want to be in the same room with him? It would be really awkward unless it was done over multiple interviews. But again, the closest I've been to him would have been Abu Dhabi. He wasn't in Abu Dhabi at the time, I'm guessing. We're probably only about 50 miles apart then. But where would an interview with Al Heyman take place? I just think, for me, I'd rather be around Al Heyman than Daniel Kinahan by far. I think his stories in music and in boxing would be great. At Insider, we've got a platform that's, we write about all things. I think we've got 600 journalists, more than 1,000 staff, doing sales and other things. Al Heyman.
I've seen, I think I mentioned it on the show before, but I've seen Al Heyman once in the flesh. I saw him at Staples Center in Los Angeles during the LA press tour for Mayweather McGregor.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I saw him in backstage. I think they were already doing the show in the front. I think Mayweather and McGregor were going back and forth, so everybody was out there watching, and I had to go use the restroom. So I was in the front with all the other media members, and I had to sneak my way out because I really had to go. So I went to the back, and I went, and then as I was coming back, I was walking down one of the hallways right there, and Kelly Swanson, the PR for PBC Mayweather, was at a door that was just propped open, and she was talking to somebody. And when I kind of really looked at who she was talking to, it was Heyman, because he was tall. Obviously, seems like a tall guy, but he just cracked the door open and he kind of put his foot right through the little space, and he was just talking to her, and she was talking to him. And I just looked, and I was like, oh my God. And I just kept walking. I was like, well, what am I going to do? If I go talk to him, he's just going to close the door. So, yeah, it's the only time I've ever seen him. And I know a lot of people don't see him. He is around during these events. He just stays in the shadows, but
yeah, he definitely exists.
Yeah, he definitely exists. I've seen him. Yeah, I've definitely seen him. So he is there.
Kaiser Soze. That's who he is.
I think so. Let's move on to the fight reviews. This past Saturday, actually, from the Alexandria Palace in London on DAZN. John-Ryder gets the split decision over Daniel Jacobs. What'd you think about Ryder's performance, Al?
Like patchy. I think round 7. I think it was round 7. Round 7 and 8. I thought he really kicked on a gear. But it was kind of like a fight split in between thirds. But the first third was maybe the first half of the fight, and Jacobs was boxing better. But then when Ryder really, took control of the middle rounds, it looked like he could have taken control of the fight. But Jacobs kind of like got back into it a little bit. I didn't score it, but I did think Jacobs probably edged it, because you can't really. I'd struggle to give 7 rounds to Ryder, whereas I think I could probably quite easily give 7 rounds to Jacobs. But you don't get much justice in boxing, and poetic justice doesn't really exist, because you think like Ryder was kind of, could have beaten Callum Smith, who then went on to get the Canelo fight. Smith didn't look good in that fight at all. So then, is he getting the result here because, he was jobbed there? But then you're jobbing Jacobs. So who's really, no matter what in boxing, you're always getting someone who's not going to be happy, and even less happy, if it's going to come down to a robbery. But I don't think this was a robbery. I just think it was like, at worst, whiffy judging, but at best, it's just one of the results that didn't go the right way that the majority of people thought. How did you guys score it?
Mike, what do you think?
No, I kind of agree with that. I thought Jacobs kind of went out into a good, substantial lead, and Ryder really needed to win, quite a few of the last few rounds. I think it's one of those things where he kind of got a bit of home cooking. The home fighter kind of goes in like wrongly 1 or 2 rounds up, and I think those were enough to kind of steal it, even though the English judge scored it to Jacobs correctly. It was the 2 foreign ones that actually gave it to John Ryder. But with it being a matchroom show and him kind of being the matchroom guy, they kind of know where the check's coming from. Am I allowed to say that?
I guess, yeah. Al, do you think, obviously Jacobs is in his mid-30s. I think he's like 36, just about. He's been around the game for a long time. He's obviously accomplished a lot, especially on the financial side. But do you think, like, after fighting the likes of Gennady Golovkin and then Canelo, especially the reported payday that he got against Canelo, do you think there's been like a change in him in the subsequent fights following those 2 fights?
From him, or like the fights he's getting because of the promoter? Do you think?
Well, no, from Jacobs himself. Like, do you still see that same passion and that fire that he had at one point? I don't know.
Good question. I think maybe it's just like, he's just on the the decline. Really, we saw him at the peak, and from surviving bone cancer to, becoming a world champion, there's a great story, and he's achieved a lot in the sport, and gotten to really big heights. But even if he did get the 115 to 113 with Ryder, I don't think that would have really been a great result for him. I don't think Ryder is like a world level, it's hard to say this because you just think like you're not trying to disrespect anyone, but there are levels to boxing, and I don't see Ryder as being like the number one or number two in the division, and I don't really see him doing that in the next few years. So like if Jacobs isn't beating him when he's in the top 10, 15, 20, however where you rank him, where does Jacobs go? And he would have beaten him 5 years ago, I would safely presume. But I don't know, I still think there's fights out there. Why wouldn't you put Andrade with Jacobs now? Why can't you get Andrade a fight? It's become a meme now that this guy who was like, when he was boxing, who was the English guy that he boxed like years and years ago, but he looks amazing. The English guy went over to New York. His name's like escaped me now. Can you remember who I'm talking about?
Mike, do you remember?
You know about Andrade?
Yeah.
Who's he fought? He fought Quigley. He fought.
That was more recent though.
Yeah.
I'm just going to quickly.
What year was it? Do you remember, Al?
Like ages ago. It must be like 8 years ago, if not longer.
Oh.
I mean, but you're right. You're right though. He kind of is becoming a meme in terms of not landing a significant name, and I don't doubt that like he's not trying, or especially Eddie Hearn's not trying, and maybe. I'm sure there's fighters out there, the more significant names in the division, who are just saying, well, everybody else is declining him, so I'm just going to join the club.
But no, I mean, to me, that's a fight. Put Jacobs in with Andrade, put it in the northeast of the US. Andrade's from
Rhode Island.
Rhode Island. And Jacobs is New York. That's a fight to have up there. Ryder, so that he's not getting the Canelo fight. He's the mandatory challenger for the winner of Morel and Ubossi Newley.
Right.
So, Morel will mop him up.
Yeah. But I mean, even Canelo, he's got way bigger things to do. He's like, maybe Jamal Charlo on May 7th. If not Charlo, it's going to be Bivol and then Golovkin. Yeah. Whichever order you do those fights, I don't care. But, if you do them in any order, it's, that's a great run. So no matter if you do the 2-fight deal with DAZN this year and do a 1-fight deal with PBC and Showtime next year, that's Canelo tied up for at least, 12 months, if not 18 months. You would think there'd be another, Benavidez would be there as well. That, whoever's in the Canelo sweepstakes now outside of those four, they're going to be waiting a long time. So yeah, Ryder's not getting Canelo for a while. And as I say, Morel, I think, is the one to beat him before he even got there.
Yeah,
right.
Morel's good. Morel's was he like a world champion or WBA regular champion after like 6-7 fights? Yeah. He's good.
I think Ryder, and I don't think it's going to be too soon, but like I think Ryder's only chance to land a Canelo sweepstakes. Obviously, it helps that Canelo has some type of relationship with Eddie Hearn and DAZN still, and DAZN is giving dates to Reynoso's promotion and Canelo's promotion and to their young fighters and stuff like that on DAZN cards. But I mean, do you think, Al, there's a chance that like, if Ryder did land a Canelo, it would be more of like the Canelo show in the UK in a big stadium? Like, I think there might be a chance that Canelo could fight in the UK, and I mean, Ryder would probably be a name that could fit that bill.
I don't think you'd need to put in like, I don't think it would matter who the opponent was. If you put Canelo in Wembley Stadium, he would sell it out against anyone, such as, he's the clear, maybe not the clear, but, for me, he's the number one fighter in the sport. And it's hard to think, who's going to really beat him. He's going to be there for a while, and he's got to that, he's just the face of the sport, probably the shoulders, because he's almost carrying it, but outside of Canelo, Joshua is a bit of a, when it comes to pay-per-view and, selling tickets, that's the guy in Britain. In America, maybe Spence and Tank. God, I was about to forget. I was about to forget John Devontae Davis, but yeah, those are the four guys. But I don't know. Canelo could, if it wasn't Ryder, it'd be someone else. It could easily sell out anywhere in Britain. Wembley's good because it's better location than Tottenham Hotspur. For the Usyk and Joshua fight, everyone had a nightmare getting home. But if it was going to be Ryder, a UK fight would kind of make sense. But at the same time, how much money is he really making Canelo? I'm talking, on pay-per-view now in America. I just think that kind of would, offset whatever the stadium, ticket selling is you're getting in Britain. Maybe you could have it at a time that would be okay, on Eastern time and Pacific time. But then again, you're probably putting it in a stadium at 3, 4, 5 in the morning. You're only really looking at the summer then. I don't know. The logistics would be weird, I think. And I don't think the fight just doesn't interest me. No offense to anyone involved in that, in those teams. But, what interests me is the options he's already got. Charlo, Bivol, Golovkin. I wouldn't have even minded seeing him go up to cruiserweight. I just think there's so many more interesting things for Canelo to do than to take on Ryder right now.
Al, you thought £25 was a lot. Welcome to America. $75 a pay-per-view now, Al. Now that you're living over here, buddy.
Well, what was Mayweather and McGregor? Was that even close to 100?
I think
Mayweather Pacquiao was 100.
Mayweather Pacquiao was 100. Yeah, I think Mayweather McGregor maybe $89, $89.99.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think it was slightly cheaper. Yeah,
it's a little bit cheaper, but not by much. Yeah, it's the pay-per-view market is totally. I mean, you know this, Al, but it's totally different over here from a financial perspective. But
and then they mask it. They're like, oh, it's $70, and then below it's like, but if you want it in HD, it's $75. Yeah. Like, who watches it in SD?
Yeah, that's what they do. Yeah, it's we'll see if it's worth it though. We're gonna buy. We're all hardcore fans at the end of the day. But obviously, like we mentioned, John Ryder gets a split decision over Daniel Jacobs. So we'll see how each of their careers move forward in the coming year or so. Also on the card, Felix Cash remains undefeated at 15-0 with a unanimous decision win over Magomed Madiev. I hope I said that right. 15-1-2. This was for the vacant WBC International Middleweight title. What do you think about Felix Cash's performance, Al?
From rounds 3 to 9, so it was fine. But I don't know. But the thing that I took away was I thought Madiev could bang when he wanted to. That left hook in the second round, where he kind of threw the shot, stepped in at the same time, just put him down. That was like an awesome shot. I've watched that, replayed it a few times, and put him down again in the 10th. I don't know. I think Cash is I think kind of like defensively needs to kind of work on that a little bit, maybe concentration as well. Like work in progress would be my takeaway from Cash. I'd like to see Madiev again though. I thought he was if he could fight like he did, throw those sort of shots with bad intentions that he did in the second round and the 10th round, but more consistently, or find those openings, and box into those openings a bit more. I think he could have, done more damage, and I'd like to see him. I don't know. I haven't seen him that much. Have you guys heard of Madiev too many times before?
No, he's definitely a TV fighter though.
Yeah.
He's one of those TV fighters, you just stick him on there as an opponent because he just doesn't care. But I like Felix Cash. I was kind of disappointed in this performance, but I thought it was fair play to him to come back from what he's gone through against such an aggressive opponent, because even the commentators, when they were walking to the ring, they were saying, this is a real fighter. This isn't a gimme. And then obviously when he got dropped in the second round, respect for his chin as well, because that was a hard shot. He got up and, kind of used his brain and kind of hugged him a little bit, just trying to buy himself some more time. But yeah, after that, he did take over. But yeah, I think you're right. He needs to work on his defense a little bit more. And but he's good to watch. He's kind of he kind of reminds me of this is like a football thing or a soccer thing, like one of those fancy players. But then you think, what does he actually do? Because he kind of he's stylish, isn't he, in the ring? But then after this performance, I was like, yeah, maybe he's stylish, but he hasn't really got much substance. Maybe he's not gonna, reach the levels I thought he was.
He's got a great name as well, though. I'll give him that. Having Cash as a surname is pretty cool. With Cash, who do you put him in with, though, in the next 8, 6, 12, 18 months? Because you've got so many, promoter broadcaster, navigating that sort of territory. For me, like, how far away is he from Munguia?
Right.
That'd be a good fight, and stylistically.
Throw him in there with Gabe Rosado. Gabe Rosado's a TV fighter too. That's why he gets so many fights.
Jump. Oh man, I love Gabe Rosado. He's cool to talk to. He's a cool guy. And he deserved, the year he had last year.
Good old commentary as well.
Yeah. I want to see, the longer he stays in the sport, if he's on, on the mic or in the ring or in an interview, he's got a lot to offer in all of those departments.
I think, like you said, though, I think the Cash Munguia stylistically would be a bit of a nightmare for Munguia.
What do you feel like? For Munguia, do you think it's like they would see? Because like I'm not too excited about the Demetrius Ballard fight this weekend. It's kind of like, how do you go from, Munguia's had a lot of fights, and I think the perception of him from a fan's point of view is, when is he going to make the step up? So would Felix Cash would fans be satisfied with that as a step up, or would they see it as a step sideways, do you think?
In the UK, I think that'd be looked on well, because I think Felix Cash is obviously known in the UK, but this side of the pond, people are going to be like, who's this no-name Brit? But then I think once they saw him after a couple of rounds, because Munguia lost to Dennis Hogan. Hogan boxed rings around him. He only got it because it was in Mexico. That was a horrendous scorecard. And then I would say Cash is a better than Dennis Hogan. And I don't think Munguia's changed that much under, is it Morales?
Yeah.
Right? I don't think he's changed that much. He's not fleet of foot now. So I think, facing someone like Cash with the right game plan, I think Cash would box his ears off. That's just a good matchup.
I think they could put that together. Obviously, it's like, they share the same broadcaster. Because I was looking through before this call, I was kind of looking through, where does Cash go? And I was trying to think, promote a rivalry broadcaster doesn't make sense. You go for, I think Cash is ranked in the top 40. I was going all the way to the top 5. I was like, Munguia, DAZN, kind of makes sense. It should be easy to make. But, how much DAZN is kind of going into the Munguia fight now. But how I know DAZN put a lot of weight in how valuable Munguia is from a subscriber point of view, whether it comes to new subscribers or retaining subscribers. I'm told what DAZN likes to do is put Munguia, they haven't done it this time, but they like to put Munguia like literally the month after Alvarez. So Mexican American fans come into DAZN, whether as a new subscriber or retaining subscriber, they come in for the Canelo month, but then they stay for the extra month the month after to see Munguia. So he's valuable to DAZN from that point of view. So whether they would, maybe if they thought the same way as you, thinking, that might be a hard fight stylistically to put him in with Cash, whether they'd risk it now or, wait for him to develop a bit more under Eric Morales. Well,
let's talk about that fight, Al, since you brought it up. We'll obviously talk about the preview of it this upcoming Saturday. Jaime Munguia goes up against Demetrius Ballard for the WBO Intercontinental Middleweight title. Are you a fan of this matchup? I mean, who do you think comes out on top?
Munguia, I think, but I'm not really too big of a fan of the matchup. I do think there's good storylines there, though. I think that the weight that DAZN are putting in on him, it kind of reminds me a little bit of, I'm not sure if they've done this publicly with Munguia, but the way DAZN are kind of like really honing in on Conor Benn in the UK, I think they see Munguia as like the Conor Benn of like, removing Canelo from the equation. I feel like there are parallels there to be made. I think that when it comes to value for that territory and subscriber demographic, I think they put a lot of weight in and value in what Munguia can offer now and in the future. So I'm definitely invested in him, to see whether DAZN could get a return on that. And I just think there's interesting things like having Morales back in, not back in the sport, but having Morales being up front and center in, such like a young up and coming fighter. I don't know. I grew up on like the Mexican foursome, with Marquez,
Barrera.
Yeah, Barrera. I just think having these guys in the spot, having the old, it's showing your age again, but having the guys that you kind of like really, really lit your fire, decades ago, it's still in the sport. It's just good to see. So I like that link up, and I want to see, what they've been working on together. because if you're going to use that in the ring against an opponent, you could probably get away with using that in the ring against Ballard this weekend, rather than, potentially cash if that was happening this weekend rather than in the future. What do you guys think?
Like you were just talking about how the zone use him, I think me and Dan was both surprised when we were ringside for Munguia-Rosado.
Yeah,
the type of attention and the type of pop he drew. I thought he was more of a boxing hardcore, but yeah, the ovation he got on the Honda Center was surprising to me. I didn't realize how popular he was.
It was a good turnout too. It was like there's actually quite a bit of people here. We knew there was going to be a significant, a good amount of people there. Southern California, large Mexican fan base, Mexican fighter. A lot of boxing fans out here. But when we walked into that arena, we were pleasantly surprised. We're like, oh, this is actually way better than we thought. They've got something here, and he's young enough where they can really keep going with it.
I think with Munguia as well, it's like he represents for me one of the things that is most exciting about boxing right now. Like boxing's not dying, like I'm sick of like these like ill thought. I don't even think they're takes. I think it's just like, it's just one of those things that people put out just for like rage clicks.
Like sensationalism.
Yeah. Boxing's not dying. But when you've got, how old's Munguia? I think he's 21, is he? But
it's a little bit older, I think, but I think it's about around the same time. Yeah, same age.
He like there's so many fighters 25 years old and younger who are just, you could probably go through maybe 25, 30, 40 of these guys. So even going down to like teenage years, some of the guys that are coming through Mayweather Promotions, I just think even if 5 of them, like 10% of them, get through to the really highest levels, that's so many, who could carry the sport in 5-10 years. And that to me is exciting to watch. Anyone who's a casual boxing fan or a hardcore boxing fan, when you've got a young guy who has the fan base, who has the support of the broadcaster, I think it's good to see, because ultimately anyone coming through, they're always going to be the future, and it's good to see almost like the circle going through, rather than everyone kind of focusing on the older guys. And Canelo's not really even an older guy, but it just seems like he's been around for so long. I don't know. I love seeing the shine on the youth, and Munguia is one of those who I'd like to see. That I'd always tune in to see them, because I just think they represent like the future.
Assuming he gets the win this weekend, Munguia, does he land a significant name at 160 pounds in his next fight?
I don't think so, just because of how much weight DAZN, or I think they kind of would be more patient with him, and I don't know. I can be patient, but if I don't mind the patient approach if you're going to have like 5 fights a year, but and then at the end of that, you really need to start, as long as you're stepping it up bit by bit. But if he's only going to fight a few times, that becomes a little bit of an issue. This isn't just Munguia, but it's just in general, I think. But I don't think they'd be in a rush to give him like a big name that we'd be accustomed to, in like the top 5. I think we'll still be getting I think we're getting a baby step approach with Munguia.
He's going to be like Chavez. He's going to be like 82-0.
Yeah. Maybe. You never know. But yeah, obviously looking forward to that matchup. And then also this upcoming weekend, finally, I know for you guys, this is I guess a long time coming. I don't know if you guys I'm interested to see if you guys are happy, or maybe you guys don't care if this is actually happening after so many years, but from the Manchester Arena in Manchester on ESPN Plus here in the States, Amir Khan, 34-5, finally goes up against Kel Special K Brook, 39-3. When this was first made, Al, were you actually surprised that they actually made it and it was on the verge of happening?
Yeah, probably. Just because it to me, it's almost like a in slightly inferior UK version of Crawford Spence, where it was just this merry-go-round of rumor and nonsense, and he said, and are we going to get this fight or not? And ultimately, I was kind of settled on the fact we were never going to get Khan-Brook. I feel like the temperature in the UK for this fight is actually pretty high. I think people are really, I think that it's going to be quite a really good atmosphere at Manchester Arena. and I think it will be watched very heavily. I don't care too much, but it's more because it's got to the point where what is really at stake. If they were fighting, even 3 years ago, more would be at stake. One of the winner could then go back into a title shot. Whoever wins here is not going to get a title shot, anytime soon, unless somebody wants like a gimme. These are two guys that are so far past their prime, maybe not so far, but they are beyond their prime, that the interest level for me is there, but it's just so far below what it would have been, had we got the fight earlier. And it's annoying in a way, because Britain doesn't really mind, or British boxing doesn't really mind putting two guys like this together early. Like we had Froch Groves, we had Joshua White. There has been a few examples here where, Britain doesn't mind putting two guys who have got O's, who are, in that, we're mentioning earlier, the 25 and under category, putting them together and just seeing who, who's the better man on that specific day. If they rematch 5 years down the line, and, you can still do that. But so I'm probably a little bit like, I'm not as enthused as what I think the temperature for this fight is really hot in the UK, but I don't find it too hot myself. But I think it will be a really, really fun fight. I just don't think it's that big of a fight, because I don't think it really means anything anymore.
Al, do you think we'll see two guys, good camps, but slightly faded, but a good fight? Or do you think it's just going to be, like two washed up fighters where we're all like the hype's up here, but the fight's down here, and we're kind of like, oh God. Maybe
I think we might still get to, maybe not washed, but definitely past prime fighters. But I still think we'll get a really fun fight, because the one thing that really took me this week, and you guys might have seen it, and the followers of this show will probably have seen it, the promotional video that came out, where the human interest level in boxing can be absurd sometimes, but like in a good way. But Khan-Brook showing just raw emotion on that promotional show, where he just wanted respect from Amir Khan, and it was you can see it in his eyes. It's like, I hate to use the cliche, like a son looking for the father's, respect. That's what it looked like. It looked like he was going to cry at one point. It looked like he was like Amir Khan must have been his idol growing up. And he like Khan just kind of gave him a trolling, tongue in cheek, well done. So Kel for me has shown his emotion already. Granted, that wouldn't have been filmed this week; it would have been filmed, maybe even a month ago. But if he's going to fight with emotion, Khan's still got more than enough to get the win.
Guess how many views that has on YouTube? That Gloves Are Off episode that you were just speaking about.
Go on.
In one day, 500,000.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was really good TV, because again, to me, you're seeing something real. that was real. It wasn't any manufactured beef. It wasn't like anything, like a pushing and shoving. It was someone really wanting just to get like a bit of respect from, the other thing is that I find interesting, the dynamic with Khan and Brook. I think Brook has had more respect in the UK and not as much respect in the US, but Khan has had barely any respect really with a section of British fight fans in the UK, and he got his respect in the US. And racism is probably at play there. I think in Britain, like a largely white fan base probably might not have liked seeing a British Pakistani athlete succeed. And then when he got knocked out in, I don't know what seconds it was, when Prescott knocked him out, it was certainly within a round, might have even been in the first minute. He basically became a meme before memes were a thing. But then what he did after that, he just went on a bit of a run where can't remember who he beat Barrera, but I think Barrera was, way gone by the time Khan got to him.
Maidana, that fight against Maidana.
Oh God, when he put Maidana, like when they made that fight, I was thinking that is another knockout waiting to happen. If Prescott's putting him down in, within a round, what's Maidana going to do to him? Maidana was a dog, for how many years? And that Maidana was already up at that point. But Khan put him down in the first round with a horrible body shot. Yeah. And got that was, a real statement win at the time, and still is probably his one of his signature wins. He got Zab Judo, went on to beat Luis Calazzo, Devon Alexander. Most of these fights taking place in America. For me, where he seemed to build up more respect, and that's the respect he should have had in Britain all along.
He gets mobbed out here when he comes to the fights, when he was doing camps out here. Yeah, he's popular.
He
is, yeah.
should be. I think he's he's done some good stuff. He's done a lot of stuff for charity that I think gets underreported, especially in Britain. So I've always found that bit interesting. Like Brook, like there's definitely like Khan probably would have traded, the lack of sort of not. Don't know if he got racist abuse, but I feel like there was racism at play why he didn't get the respect in Britain, but that Brook did. Whereas Brook would have traded, the respect that Khan had. I don't know. So there's weird dynamics at play in this fight, but it seems to me that Khan has a better. I think he's got his mind more on it than Brook.
Can you give us a winner or not? Because you cover it.
I think Khan. Yeah, I think I've always preferred as a for what they've done in the sport. Both have gone on to achieve great things, and I don't want to attract anything from either of them. But I've always thought whenever they fought, I always would have given the edge to Khan, if not, swung wildly towards Khan at some point. It's just such a weird time for the fight to happen. But I think Khan's always had better boxing ability. And when he was on at the peak of his powers, just nipping in and nipping out and firing away a few combinations, getting out of trouble, he just looked mesmerizing when he could do that at the speed he managed.
Yeah.
So if he can do even a tiny bit of that against Brook, I think he wins pretty easily. But if Brook can draw him into a bit of a dogfight, then it should be Brook's to win.
Al, obviously, Amir Khan, respectively, he fought Canelo, was knocked out. Kell Brook fought Triple G, was stopped as well. Khan fought Canelo in 2015, I believe, and then Brook, Triple G, I think was 2016, I believe. Do you think that Khan fighting Canelo, especially happening first, had any pressure on on Brook to take that fight with Triple G, to kind of, since Canelo and Triple G were kind of have their rivalry at that time, and even going forward, and Brook saw the opportunity, was like, well, he took the fight against this guy's rival, who's the same size as him. I'm going to take it against him.
I mean, great balls on the both of them to do that, because there's just, weight classes exist in boxing for a reason, and we saw that in both of those two fights. I was surprised both of them took those fights, just because, I don't know, they're like jumping up too many weight divisions against guys that were killers. And for me, the result would never have been in doubt. I thought Brook, there were moments where Brook, boxed all right against Golovkin, showing that pull counter and things, and just getting out of the way. When Brook's defense is on point, he's actually, he's really good. But yeah, I just think, oh God, they just got overpowered, both of them.
True or false? True or false, Al? Floyd Mayweather ducked Amir Khan.
Oh, false.
There's a narrative out there about that. There's a narrative.
Floyd, did he duck Paul Williams? Go away. The amount of things Floyd did in his career, how can you question anything? This just shows how spoiled we are as, fans and media, when we see things and we just can't appreciate them in the time. Like Vladimir Klitschko is a great example of this. I really like Vladimir, and, I think he's a good guy. I think he's an ambassador for boxing and was a good champion. But, he didn't really get the respect he deserved at the time he was making all the defenses. Floyd, I think again, the dynamic there, I think Floyd got more respect in Britain by British fans than he did seem to by American fans. But looking back, no matter what you thought of him at the time, 50-0, the names that are on his record, how can you say he ducked anyone? The guy just has it's a legendary career. But yeah, look at who he fought, and then look at Amir Khan, and just think, how would you duck any? You just don't have the mentality to think I'm ducking anyone. When you're fighting at the elite level that he did for, from 1998 when he fought his first world title all the way through to 2015. Let's not include 2017, but all the way up until Manny Pacquiao, and he beat everyone. And for anyone you're just a Floyd hater. You can like both Floyd and Pacquiao. Look at the names on Pacquiao's resume. respect to them both. I think we lived through to see those careers unfold was amazing. I just hope, from this 25 years and under group that we mentioned earlier, I just hope we see a couple more guys come through, that we see more legendary careers unfold. I mean, Canelo's, fighting his way for that, but I just don't think he's really had the opposition that certainly Pacquiao had, when he had all the rivalries with pretty much every top tier Mexican fighter that you could, the 4 fights with Marquez. Canelo's only had the 2-fight rivalry with Golovkin. And if they fight a third time, I don't think it will be anywhere near as competitive as the first two. Hopefully someone just announces themselves in one of the divisions he sort of multiple divisions he competes in, where he can have another rivalry.
Mike, who wins on Saturday? Khan-Brook.
It's hard, isn't it? Because it's just kind of who's more washed. That's the thing. Like, has Khan's speed gone? Because obviously he's older. That's one of the first things to go. But then at the same time, is Kell-Brook going to be able to make weight? The fact they've had to go for was it 149, and then also there's a rehydration. How much Kell's kind of naturally just stockier, isn't he? He's a big unit. So is that going to affect him? I'm not going to sit on the fence. I'm going to go with Khan. Yeah, I think Khan will take it. Just probably a little bit more active than Kell-Brook's been. Probably more naturally that size as well. Probably doesn't go too much over that kind of weight limit anyway. He's naturally kind of skinny guy. So yeah, I think so. And I think Kell might go in there and just try and blow him out and end up getting caught or something like that. Because, like Al said in that the episode of The Gloves Are Off, like, he was so wound up, just sat there looking at him over the table.
Right. Yeah. You're right. I mean, see, I'm kind of leaning towards Brook because of he's a stockier guy, but that's obviously in the back of my mind is the weight issue. And then he's the rehydration clause. He is obviously, working hard. He's not 25 years old anymore. It takes, the older you get, it takes a little more extra in the gas tank to get down to those types of weights.
Because Crawford essentially knocked him out with a jab. Yeah,
that's true.
And it was that the weight, because his legs just went like, and Kell had never really had a chin that bad. And I put that down to either making weight wrong or just having to make weight, and his body just can't do it now. Because you see him sometimes when he does those camps over in like Fuerteventura, and you see him and he looks huge, looks absolutely huge.
Right. I did see a detail or a tweet within the last week or two. I haven't verified it, but I think it's accurate that Kell-Brook and Amir Khan are younger than Mayweather and Pacquiao were when they fought in 2015. So I thought that was interesting. We're talking about like past their prime and stuff like that. But I mean, would we say that Pacquiao and Mayweather were past their prime in 2015, or are they anomalies? What do you think, Al?
I mean, I'd go with anomalies just because they're, the two icons of those 2 decades prior, but they definitely were faded forces. But I don't know. I feel like looking back, I haven't watched it again, but I feel like if I did, I don't think it would have been. I think I'd be viewing it differently. I feel like it's that fight. People probably were criticizing Mayweather from what I was seeing, but I feel like Pacquiao. Floyd boxed how he boxes. Really, if you didn't like that fight, I think it was more down to Pacquiao not being able to do what you were expecting Pacquiao to be able to do. What was the question? I was just rambling a little bit there.
Oh no, I was just asking, like, if since Khan and Brook are essentially younger than Mayweather and Pacquiao were at that time.
I feel like that's an interesting point. I didn't even know that, but the levels between like Khan and Brook, I feel like are credits to British boxing and have achieved great things, not just in Britain but also America, which is hard to do for a British combat athlete. But the levels between them and Pacquiao and Mayweather, and I don't know. I feel like the fight would be more fun from no matter if you're British or international. I feel like the Khan-Brook fight, I honestly feel like it would be more fun than what played out with Mayweather and Pacquiao. And if Brook does come in and charge him, like what Michael was just saying, and knocks him out, or fails to and then gets knocked out himself, do it again. Why not? This is why I was thinking like the temperature's not too high with me, just because I don't think there's anything really at stake, and neither of them have got what have they got to offer beyond this apart from more fights with each other. So if the first fight was it was a lot of fun, do it again. I don't mind seeing that. I think that would be a more interesting. That would be a stake that would make it more interesting to me anyway.
It's only Tuesday, Al. The WBC can come up back with a belt before Saturday.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. I was honestly expecting that. I was, and and I was like, each day passed by and there was no news about it. I was like, oh, maybe they're not going to do it, but we still have a couple days left. We still have a couple days left.
Before we move on, Dan, a guesstimate how many pay-per-view buys though?
I think it will sell well, because I think one thing that I find funny is that it was only last year when Eddie Hearn was saying, how much the fight is, how the fight's going to be so good and it's going to sell and all this stuff, and then he's saying this week that it's trash and he's not going to watch it. But I feel like there's like more, that's just more animosity with the Sky Sports machine that he's now not a part of. But that Sky Sports machine is what is making this fight so big. I would be surprised if this is a flop. I think this will sell high. Not as high as a Joshua fight, but I wouldn't be surprised for this to get, and like, I don't know, 400,000 in the UK at the minimum. They're big names. Amir Khan is a silver medalist at what games? I can't even remember. 2002, 2004. 2004. It was in Athens. Wasn't it?
Yeah.
And he's been a household name, not in boxing, but in just sport in general in Britain for a long time. And Khan-Brook, I don't think his name value is as big as Khan when it comes to crossover appeal. But these are two guys who certainly are well known, not just to fight fans, but to mainstream media. That they're going to be. I think they're just going to ramp it up and up throughout this week. So I would expect this to be a success certainly at a UK level.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was telling Mike about that earlier today, that I actually think it's going to sell really well. Just to on how the trend is leading up to this weekend, especially. Rounding off that card, Natasha Jonas 10-2-1 goes up against Chris Namus for 25-6 for the vacant WBO super welterweight title. And also this weekend, a Russian fight in Russia from the RCC Boxing Academy in Ekaterinburg, Russia. I gave it a shot. Jorge Linares. I was surprised to see this. Jorge Linares returns for the WBC silver lightweight title against Zaur Abdullaev, 14-1. I think I said that wrong too. I said his name multiple times before and I said it wrong. I wasn't even aware. Al, I don't know if you're aware, but I was telling Mike earlier today, I wasn't even aware Jorge Linares was fighting, let alone this weekend, but anytime soon like this. Were you aware?
No, actually, but like I feel like might have an excuse. My mind's been so focused on the move, but
right.
But with Linares, I love that he's fighting in Russia. I've got to say, because like when you look at his career, I haven't looked at his career in a while, but he's fought in Tokyo. He's fought all across California, New York, Venezuela. I think he's fought, like, his career has taken him all over the world. And when you think about like a world level, boxer or a world champion, that's cool to do. I think it's good that he's getting himself out there still in places that still surprise us to this day. Right.
Yeah. He's definitely still out there. I was surprised, but I've always been a fan of the guy. I've always been a big fan, and he's one of those guys where you love to see him fight just on his style. He's a beautiful fighter. News and notes as we're rounding towards the finish line here on this week's episode with the insiders. Al, Dawson. Al, I'm sure you saw this news. Give us your take on it. Ryan Garcia has announced, and then has also reported that he will now be training with Joe Goosen after leaving the Canelo camp in San Diego and Eddie Reynoso. Were you surprised hearing that news? And if you were or you weren't, how do you think he does under the tutelage of Joe Goosen?
I mean, in one point, like, I know they've worked together before, so I don't think it was if he was going to leave Eddie Reynoso, I don't think it's too much of a surprise to see him go back to or link up with Joe Goosen when they've already got a pre-existing relationship. But I was surprised at the timing of it all. I wasn't expecting him to leave that camp, just because you don't really hear of anyone leaving Eddie Reynoso. When he's got Canelo, Oscar Valdez, Andy Ruiz, and Frank Sanchez. And, you know, he was talking this week about Anthony Joshua as well. You know, what a gym to be around. But with Joe Goosen, I don't think he, you know, loses that much. Joe Goosen's like, I've spoken to him before. I know you guys probably have as well, but he's a Californian guy. And, you know, whether he's on the mic on a breaking down a fight or whether he's in the gym, he just seems like someone who's good to be around. And speaking personally, he's the sort of person, if I was a fighter, I probably would want to work for Joe Goosen, just because I think, like, if you got respect from him, I feel like it would be quite valuable. You know, I feel like if you got like a, you know, like a attaboy or, you know, like, well done, I feel like it's probably worth a lot from someone like him. I feel like you really have to work for his respect. And when you get it, it probably feels quite good. But interestingly, like this week as well, I know Vito Mielnicki Jr., so like a 18-year-old kid from New Jersey.
New Jersey, yeah.
So he's coming back to going to California again to work with Joe Goosen. He's a welterweight, but Ryan Garcia is a lightweight. I think there's two guys there who will probably be thrown in together to spar and train alongside one another. I think it's an interesting mix, and I feel like there's, you know, that there's still talent that Joe Goosen will know and be able to use either in-house like Vito, or, you know, go further afield and go to all the other gyms. I feel like, you know, I don't think it's going to be a bad move at all.
Teofimo Lopez told recently, I think within the last couple of days, he told ES News, Ellie Seckback of ES News, that when I think Ellie had asked him his take on Ryan leaving Eddie Reynoso to go with Joe Goosen, Teofimo kind of implied that it was because of him, that Teofimo Lopez, I guess, has been talking to Eddie Reynoso maybe to train him. And I guess it might happen. He didn't confirm it, but he said, oh, you know, you might hear something soon. And he was kind of implying like, oh, I think that's why he left, because he saw that Eddie Reynoso and I were talking and I might have been coming in to join the team. Do you think that he's just stirring the pot with that, or do you think that has any truth to it?
I don't know what the culture would be like over here, but I remember seeing multiple heavyweights, you know, potentially coming into one gym in England. And I asked the coach at the time, like, you know, does this present, you know, conflict of interest? And they said, no, you know, they train together, they would learn off each other. And there's so many routes you can go, where one can go for the WBA, one can go for the WBO, and they don't have to meet, you know, straight away. I don't think Teofimo and Ryan Garcia were going to meet anytime soon anyway. So I'm kind of inclined to think he might be stirring the pot a little bit, because, you know, if you were going to go and join the camp, why wouldn't you want to train alongside? I don't know, like, maybe the culture would be different in an American gym down in San Diego than it would be from the coaches I was speaking to for that specific example about heavyweights training alongside each other in England. But yeah, I'm still curious where like Ryan Garcia goes, because he hasn't fought since January last year, I want to say.
Right, the Campbell fight, yeah.
Yeah, and just think he's just losing time. And in this sport, you don't have too much, and it's all about timing a lot of the time. I just want to see him back in the ring to see what he can offer, where his mindset's at. And I feel like he's one of those guys who's just like, I really want to see the tank fight mainly. I feel like if you've got Gervonta Davis and you've got Floyd and you've got Leonard Ellaby and Stephen Espinoza on one side, and then you've got Ryan Garcia and you've got Bernard Hopkins and Oscar De La Hoya on another side, all on a stage, you know, how is that not, you know, promotional hype, you know, dream from like a fan point of view, media point of view, all those characters, personalities, you know, kind of warring at one another. And, you know, you've got the Oscar Floyd rivalry, but from promoters as opposed to fighters. For me, I've always thought that's the biggest fight America can make. I've always thought it's more so than Crawford Spence, to be honest. I feel like that would cross over way more to the mainstream. You know, when Gervonta Davis is taken from, you know, Atlanta to where did he fight recently? But it seems like wherever city he goes, he just
Staples Center in Los Angeles. Yeah,
you know, these are 20,000 seat arenas, and he's selling them out, or, you know, close to selling them out. And then you've got Ryan Garcia, and, you know, he's like the sort of Gen Z, you know, social media star, and, you know, posting photos or videos with you know, Instagram models and things like this. I just feel like they both tap into a culture outside of boxing that Crawford and Spence can't and haven't been able to. So if Ryan Garcia is coming back to the sport and being dedicated, and you'd think if he's linking up with Joe Goosen, it's going to be, you know, Joe's going to want dedication. That I hope is the end game that we see Tank and Ryan, in the next few years. I can be patient, but I want to see it soon. And if it's a great fight, I want to see it again and again.
Now that you kind of painted that visual picture, especially for me, I think I might actually agree with you that a Ryan Garcia Tank Davis fight might be more commercially successful than a Spence Crawford fight, because you're right. They have the kickoff press conference or what have you, and you have those two up there with their fan bases, especially, and then you have Mayweather and De La Hoya, their respective promoters, right next to them, and then you have all these photos. Like I think you would have not only boxing media covering that, but I think you would also have mainstream media covering that. And all four of their profiles combined, the press that they could do and the reach that they have. I think you're right. When you kind of paint it from a visual perspective like that, I could agree with that. I didn't really think about it like that, but I could definitely agree with that.
Crawford's a PR nightmare.
Crawford could be better with the press. He could. Yeah, he's a great fighter, but he could be. I mean, have you interviewed Crawford before, Al?
No, I think Spence could probably be a bit better as well. Because with the media, I just think Spencer's got other priorities. I think he likes his home life and being on the ranch and things like that. And I don't know, you can't knock that really. People are who they are, and and Ryan Garcia and Gervonta Gervonta's really grown into a media personality. I think more so than he was before. I met him for the first time when he fought. I want to say Liam Walsh. It was a while ago. It was when Floyd came over to London with Tank and Leonard Ellaby, and they were promoting that fight. And I met Tank at a place called York Hall. Real sacred ground for boxing in London. And I saw Tank backstage, and I was about to take a photo of him, and he just went. He looked up, and he was wrapping his hands, and he just went. And I was like, "Do I click? Do I click?" I didn't click.
Right. He didn't click.
even at that time, he just had this weird, intimidating aura. I just thought, if I click, I'm just going to get I'm either going to get my ass kicked. I don't think I'd get my ass kicked. I think he'd be more likely to just get the phone, and I want my phone.
Yeah.
I knew something would happen. I felt like something would happen. He just had an aura anyway. But he seemed quieter with his intimidation then. I feel like it's more out in the open now, and he's more vocal. And I think Ryan Garcia is just I don't know. I think they're two, in their own way. I think they're both great characters in the sport. And I'm not saying Spence and Crawford aren't. I just don't think they show it as well.
Right. They're polarizing. I think Davis and Ryan are definitely more polarizing characters than Spence and Crawford. Yeah. So that adds to it.
You want people to care, whether they care because they want to see you lose, or they care because they want to see you get knocked out, or they care because they love you, or they really support you. That's the jackpot really from a promoter's point of view. I hope we get the fight. I've spoken to Bernard Hopkins about it before, and spoken to Leonard Ellaby about it before, and on record they were both keen to do it. But I just think it's I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but. I don't know, that to me, man, that would be the fight that would bring together, like we're saying right at the start of the show about boxing, when it gets it right, there's nothing like it. And MMA wouldn't be able to touch it when boxing gets its big events right. That would just be a big event that, I don't know, I think it would be the biggest fight for years, to be honest. I think it would be bigger than, I don't think anything would be able to touch it.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a good point. Also, recent news that happened this weekend, Jermall Charlo was recently released from jail. For it looks like it was an alleged domestic incident that happened, I think, last September from what I saw. So this wasn't. I thought it was recent when I read it. I thought it just happened, and maybe there was a scuffle, but this was from last year. So do you think that affected? Do you think Canelo or his team or anything maybe kind of knew, or maybe Al Heyman told them hey, he's kind of involved in this right now, and they might pick him up? And do you think that maybe they took him out of contention for the Canelo sweepstakes?
Yeah, the thought did cross my mind as well. I think it's a good question, because it's completely different allegation and crime to what Rolly Romero was accused of. But that completely scuppered his shot at Gervonta at the time. And that was an in-house, Mayweather Promotions fight, in-house PBC fight. So some of the same executives involved, here in the decision-making process. Yeah, maybe it would be annoying though, because yeah, like you said, it's a historic thing, but whether it's now being pursued as a legal thing, it doesn't really matter when the crime or alleged crime happened. If it's being pursued now, then it kind of, that's going to be a distraction, especially as May 7th is only, 2.5 months away.
Right.
Really, you want to be in the gym, probably, if not yesterday, then next week, training for this.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's very possible.
Talking about being in the gym, that kind of leads off well to the last question, I think. Any rumors on who Joshua's going to go with? Because if the fight's going to be April, May time, you'd have thought he'd want to be spending every minute with this new trainer that we don't seem to know who he is.
Yeah, I think it does bring me back to, I think you might be able to remember as well, Michael, when Joshua was, he was huge before he even turned pro. He got the silver medal at the World Championships the year before he got the gold at the Olympics. And then, we heard when he signed with Eddie Hearn the next year, I think Eddie was saying that he told Joshua not to, because he had apparently had a choice of multiple promoters. And Eddie said, don't sign with us straight away. Go out, speak to whoever you want to, and then come back in a few months and make a decision. It turned out a few months turned into a year. Kind of reminds me of that. You would think if he's going to link up with someone new, and I think he probably will do, it would be better to do that sooner or as soon as possible. But I feel like they're doing the same thing, that they're speaking to a lot of people and just seeing which fit is right before they make the move. I wouldn't be surprised if the Usyk fight didn't even happen, to be honest. It just feels like so much time has passed now. It was October, I think it was October, when that first fight happened. It's now February, so that's 5 months at least. Yeah, I don't really know where he goes, though. I always, even when he suffered the first loss to Andy Ruiz, I kind of wanted to see him in the Mayweather gym a little bit more, because Floyd's a real big supporter of his, even back then, or in the years before. He flew over to see Joshua fight Pulev, and that was not behind closed doors. I think it was in about 1,000 people at Wembley Arena, but it was still very pandemic heavy. London tended to not really care too much about the pandemic at certain points. But at that point, coronavirus was rife in the city, and Floyd took a private jet over to see him. They also shared a little conversation like this, so you couldn't really make out what they were saying after the fight. So I kind of felt that even before, after he lost to Ruiz, I kind of wanted to see him in the Mayweather gym a little bit more, but it seems like that's not happening too much. It seems like the places he's talked about mostly is with Eddie Reynoso, where you would think he would get good sparring with Andy Ruiz, of all people, he's gone 1-1 with him, or Virgil Hunter. I don't really know what would be the best fit for him, though, because he's not gonna ever outbox Usyk. No matter what he tries, he's never going to outbox him, and he's never going to outbox, Tyson Fury, really. I think Tyson Fury is not really as good at boxer as he was before. I feel like he's changed his style so much, he's like the chameleon of the heavyweights. But still, I don't think Joshua can outbox him there. But really, I think if Joshua is going to reassert himself into the conversation at the very top of the division, he needs to... I don't know, he's also has he even got it in him to do what he would be expected to do by, Eddie Reynoso, maybe. So I don't know. I've never actually spoken to Anthony Joshua. I've been around him in press conferences, and he always kind of takes my breath away. I was going to say blows my mind. I suppose he does that as well. Just the sheer size of him. I feel like in America, maybe these athletes are kind of you see them a lot because you've got an NFL and the guys are units there. Basketball players are tall as well. But Anthony Joshua is just something else. And if he can, go back to being that physical specimen that he was, he still is, but using those advantages, maybe that would work. But I don't know. He might not have it in him. I think the Andy Ruiz, I think it even goes back before Ruiz. I feel like the Klitschko fight has changed him quite a lot. Even though that was such an awesome fight, there's so many rounds in that fight that are just so replayable. Even now, what is it now? 2022, 7 years ago. Not 7 years ago. Was that fight 2015? I think White was 2015. Maybe it was a little bit after, but I feel like that was a real big turning point for him. And it just, I don't know, maybe they're taking the time because it is, I don't know, it is a really important decision. But I don't think he should take the Usyk fight. I think he loses again.
Now, if these including that situation, if you had to pick, who does Joshua end up with as a new trainer, and who does Kambosos choose in his sweepstakes as well as of today?
Man. I feel like Reynoso probably would be a good fit just because there's space for a new star because Ryan Garcia's just left. So it's like, if he can juggle that many egos and that many big personalities, then with one going, you would think, he can handle one more. And I just think that if he's with Ruiz, the training partner there is very strong. It kind of, to me, does make sense. And I think Reynoso would do, he has improved quite a few fighters. And, he is one of the top two trainers in boxing, and he has been for years. I like Derek down in Texas, his name just
Derek James.
Derek James, yeah. I like Derek James as well. And with Kambosos, I don't know, it does seem that the wind's blowing more towards Lomachenko.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm definitely interested to see how that pans out. But obviously, we definitely appreciate your valuable time here on this week's episode of The Last Round, Al. Like I said, we've been eyeing you for quite a while. And then when we saw the news that you were coming over to the States, specifically the West Coast, I told Mike, I was like, all right, we're on the track here. We got to reach out to him and try to get him. So we appreciate you responding to our message and obviously coming on. And before we let you go ahead and plug your work, the Insider, your social media handles, anything you got upcoming, and what could readers and listeners expect from Al Dawson in the United States in combat sports?
Oh, well, I appreciate the opportunity in coming on here to your show. I think you guys are great as well. To do how many shows you've been doing as well. It's like, to succeed, it takes dedication, and you guys are dedicated. So I appreciate the time. I'm on Alan Dawson Sport at Twitter. I don't tweet too much. I'm going to try and tweet more, because I do write about 4 or 5 stories a day. I work full time at Insider. I'm I'm really lucky to be able to report about boxing and MMA and have like a press row seat to, any of the fights that are kind of going on. This weekend, I'm at the Apex for the UFC. Next Saturday I'll be at the Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas with Premier Boxing Champions. I think then I'll be back with the UFC at the Apex the week after that. Not at the Apex, so I think that's actually the T-Mobile Arena for the big UFC 272 show with Kobe Covington and Jorge Masvidal. Bit of a grudge match there between 2 former friends turned enemies. Then I'll be heading your way, I think, for Los Angeles to do to report on a couple of shows. So I'd love to hook up again. But yeah, from me, you can expect I'll be traveling. I've got like a bit of a budget with Insider to go, explore the gyms over here and get to know the fight culture here. For me, it's where it's all at. It's a dream come true to come to places like Las Vegas and Los Angeles. They're beautiful cities from what I've seen in England. And just to be able to experience these cities as fight cities as well. I want to share that with readers through the reporting I do. I've still got more to come, hopefully on the Daniel Kinahan story. For me, like I said earlier, I think it's the most interesting story, not just in combat sports. I think it's one of the most interesting stories in sports, period. When you've got one of the most powerful people in the whole sport, with an alleged background that he has, I feel like it's like an outrage that more people in boxing media aren't covering it, and it's only really me and a few others, and all the reporters in Ireland that are doing the work on it. So you can definitely expect more to come from there, because Daniel Kinahan can't keep himself out of the limelight anyway. He likes to put himself out there, and I'll be covering that as well.
We definitely appreciate your valuable time. Before we completely sign off, Mike, go ahead and give our usual, let the fans and listeners know where they can find us and follow us.
Well, at The Last Round 12 on Instagram and Twitter, and be sure to join us next week. We'll be talking about the 140-pound undisputed fight between Josh Taylor and Jack Catterall.
So for our guest of the week in Alan Dawson of The Insider, for my co-host Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round Podcast.